Drop the weapon. The voice was sharp, echoing through the crystal halls of the Velaran Palace where light shimmered off silver walls. The human didn't move. He just stood there, breathing hard, a crude plasma pistol in his scarred hand. Smoke still rose from the corridor behind him, where royal guards lay unconscious, not dead. Princess Elira Velm stepped forward, her jeweled crown glinting. Her violet eyes narrowed, every inch the ruler she was born to be. You've attacked my guards, infiltrated my home, and now you stand before me like some savage from a forgotten world. The human, Elias Corrin, slowly lowered the pistol. His voice was hoarse but calm. I didn't come to hurt anyone. I came to warn you, Elira scoffed. Warn me? You broke through royal defense grids and disabled my security sentinels to warn me. He looked up at her, and for the briefest moment she saw something. Pain. Not rage, not arrogance. Pain. Yes, he said quietly. Because they're coming for you. The Syndic fleet. You have 6 hours before this city burns. The guards rushed in, pinning Elias to the ground. He didn't resist. The plasma gun slid across the marble floor. Take him to the lower cells, Elira commanded coldly, and prepare interrogation. I want to know how this human knows anything about our enemies. Hours later, the storm began. Lightning tore across the violet skies of Valora Prime, and sirens screamed across the capital. From the tower window, Elira's confidence cracked. Fire streaked the heavens. Dozens of Syndic warships had descended without warning. She turned to her general. How did they bypass our sensors? The general hesitated. We don't know, Your Grace. It's as if they knew our defenses. Elira's heart pounded. Knew their defenses? The human's words echoed in her mind. You have 6 hours before this city burns. In the dungeons below, Elias sat chained, staring through flickering light. His body was bruised, but his resolve burned brighter than the storm. When the door slammed open, he didn't even look up. Elira entered, cloak soaked from the rain, her usual elegance replaced by grim urgency. The attack has begun, she said coldly. If you truly know something, talk. Elias finally raised his head. Now you believe me? Her tone hardened. Believe? No, but I need to know what you know. He studied her face. You think I'm a killer. You think every human is some primitive monster? But the real killers are orbiting your planet right now. Elira's jaw tightened. Explain. Elias leaned forward. The Syndic fleet uses stolen coordinates. Data from my ship's black box. They hacked human survey systems, mapped your defenses through us. I tried to stop them. That's why I came here, to stop this war before it started. And you think I'll just take your word for it? He shrugged weakly. You don't have to. Just look out your window. The palace trembled. Another explosion ripped through the city. Elira's composure shattered. Her people were dying. And this human, chained and beaten, had told her hours ago exactly what would happen. She took a deep breath. If you're lying, I'll have you executed. But if you're telling the truth, Elias met her gaze. Then I'll help you save your world. Elira hesitated, torn between pride and survival. Her father had warned her about humans, reckless, violent, unpredictable. Yet something in Elias's eyes wasn't madness. It was grief. Finally, she unlocked the chain around his wrists. Then prove it, she said. Elias stood slowly, every muscle aching. I intend to. Outside, the royal city burned brighter with every heartbeat. And as thunder rolled through the heavens, an alien princess and a hunted human walked side by side toward the war that would decide both their worlds. The skies of Valora Prime were no longer beautiful. They bled with fire. From the royal balcony, Princess Elira watched the Syndic fleet unleash chaos, crimson beams slashing through silver towers, the capital's shields flickering like dying stars. The people screamed below, their once proud city trembling beneath the rain of destruction. She turned to Elias, her voice sharp over the sirens. You said you can stop this. Tell me how. Elias was already scanning the holographic war map projected in the command chamber. His rough hands, scarred, steady, human, glided through alien symbols as if he'd studied them for years. I can shut them down, he said quickly. But I need access to your orbital relay, the one linked to the royal defense grid. The general, standing nearby, stepped forward in protest. Your Grace, we can't let an off-world criminal into our command core. Elias shot him a glare. Then enjoy watching your city burn. The tension was razor-sharp. Elira could feel her pulse in her throat. She didn't trust the human, but she didn't trust losing either. "General," she said firmly, "take us to the relay." They raced through marble corridors that shook with each blast. The walls glowed dim blue as emergency power took over. Elira's guards formed a protective ring around her, but she noticed something. Elias stayed close, not out of fear, but instinct. He positioned himself between her and every collapsing beam, every flash of danger. When debris fell from above, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed her by the arm and pulled her aside. The marble crashed where she'd stood seconds before. She gasped, heart pounding. "You could have died?" He interrupted with a small, dry smile. "Wouldn't be my first time saving someone who doesn't believe I should." She looked at him then, not as a prisoner, not as a human, but as someone who kept risking himself without hesitation. For her, they reached the Royal Defense Nexus, a massive, glowing chamber deep beneath the palace. Holographic conduits pulsed like veins of light through the floor. Elias ran to the main console, his hands flying across unfamiliar keys. "I can override the signal and feed them false coordinates. That'll scatter the fleet, but your system's coded in your language. I need you to translate." Elira stepped beside him, entering her royal encryption sigils. "If this fails, it won't," he said, eyes locked on the display. "It can't." Above them, the sky shook again. The Syndic ships drew closer. One beam struck the outer defense dome. The impact sent a shockwave that cracked the ceiling. Dust rained down. Sparks flew. And then, "Got it!" Elias shouted. "Sending ghost signal now." He slammed the command key. The holographic map blinked, and suddenly the Syndic formation began to fracture. Their ships split apart, firing in the wrong directions, chasing phantom coordinates Elias had crafted. The alarms dropped an octave. Panic turned to confusion. Elira's eyes widened. "They're retreating from the capital." Elias smiled faintly. "Told you," but before they could celebrate, a sharp warning tone echoed. "Unauthorized system access detected," the AI announced. Elias's expression fell. "Nope, no. They're tracing the signal back to this relay. They know where we are." Elira's blood ran cold. "Then we move, now." He ripped a circuit board free, grabbed her wrist, and ran. The next moment, the ceiling exploded. Energy tore through the room, throwing them both across the floor. When the smoke cleared, Elira pushed herself up, coughing. Elias was beside her, bleeding from the temple, one arm shielding her from falling debris. She looked down at him, stunned. You protected me again." He smirked weakly. "Well, Princess, you're not much use to your people if you're dead." Elira stared at him. This human, this supposed monster, and for the first time, doubt flickered inside her heart. Maybe her father had been wrong about humans after all. She helped him to his feet. "Come on. If we're going to survive this, I need you alive." "Glad we agree on that," he said. Outside, the fire still raged, but now, hope flickered through the smoke. The palace was half in ruins when the alarms finally went silent. Princess Elira Veln stood amid the smoke, her once perfect gown torn and streaked with ash. Around her, the sound of battle had faded into an eerie quiet, the kind that follows only when too much has been lost. Beside her, Elias Corrin was working fast, patching a power core with a handful of alien tools and human improvisation. His face was smeared with soot, his jaw tight with focus. She watched him for a long moment. He was not graceful, not like her polished officers. He moved with raw determination, driven by instinct and a will that ignored pain. Finally, she broke the silence. "You risked your life twice for someone who called you a criminal." He didn't look up. "Didn't do it for you." She raised an eyebrow. "No?" Elias sighed, leaning back. "Did it for the people outside. I saw them when I came here. Families running, soldiers dying, trying to defend them. Doesn't matter what species they are. They don't deserve this." Elira said nothing. Those words, they felt human, but also something deeper. Compassion that didn't need permission. She folded her arms. "You said the Syndic used human tech to find us. Why would they do that?" Elias finally looked at her. His eyes, gray, tired, carried a weight that made her chest tighten. "Because they're not after you alone. They're after me. I was part of the human exploration fleet that found their research stations. I tried to stop them from using our data to hunt new worlds. They branded me a traitor. When I found out Valora Prime was next, I came here." He looked away. "Guess I was too late." Elira took a slow breath. Not too late. We're still alive, he gave a faint smile. Barely. Outside, the glow of fires painted the night in blood-red hues. The palace courtyard was filled with wounded soldiers and citizens, huddled beneath makeshift shields. Elira stepped among them, offering her presence like a promise. Her people still needed their princess. But what struck her was the way they looked at Elias as he passed, suspicious, afraid. She heard whispers. "That's the human who broke in. He caused this, didn't he? Keep him away from the children." Her throat tightened. For years she'd believed the same, that humans were reckless destroyers dangerous to the galaxy's peace. But now, watching him lift rubble to free a trapped child with shaking arms, she couldn't reconcile that image with the man before her. She knelt beside him as the child ran to her mother. "They'll never see you as anything but the enemy," she said softly. Elias looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Doesn't matter. I didn't come for thanks, but why?" she pressed. "You could have escaped. You could have saved yourself." He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw the full truth behind his silence. "I've seen too many worlds burn," he said. "If I can stop one from falling, then I don't care what anyone calls me." Her chest ached. There was no pride in his voice, no hero's boast. Just pain. Moments later, the general approached. "Your Grace, the enemy fleet is regrouping. Their flagship remains in orbit. If they lock onto us again, we won't survive another assault." Elias turned sharply. "Then we hit them first," the general scoffed. "Hit them? With what?" "Our fleet's destroyed. Not all of it," Elias said. "Your orbital defense cannon, if we can reroute its power through the southern relay, we can take out their command ship." Elira's eyes widened. "That's suicide. You'd need to activate it manually from the relay tower. It's outside the shield zone." Elias shrugged. "Then I guess I'll need cover." Elira stared at him. "You're serious?" He gave her that crooked half-smile again. "I didn't come this far to quit now, Princess." For the first time, she didn't see a killer or even an intruder. She saw a man standing between extinction and hope, and she realized she couldn't let him face it alone. The rain returned with fury as they prepared to move out. Black smoke curled across the capital, and the sky flashed with the glow of distant explosions. Somewhere above the clouds, the Syndic fleet's flagship loomed like a vulture waiting to strike again. Princess Elira stood at the edge of the command terrace, armor plates being fastened over her ceremonial gown. Her long silver hair was tied back, her crown replaced by a combat helm. She caught her reflection in the cracked mirror. She no longer looked like a royal. She looked like someone ready to fight for her people. Behind her, Elias Corrin was checking a pack of modified explosives, human tech jury-rigged with alien cores. "You don't have to come," he said without looking up. "The relay's outside your shield zone. Once we're out there, we're on our own." Elira tightened her gloves. "You said you need cover. You'll have it." He frowned slightly. "You're not trained for field combat." She turned to him, eyes steady. "Neither were you when your world was attacked, I imagine." He smirked faintly. "Fair point, Princess." The convoy moved through ruined streets. Hover transports glided over fallen debris, escorting them toward the southern relay tower. A spire that pierced the storm clouds, half collapsed but still pulsing with weak light. As they rode, Elira's gaze wandered to the people huddled among the wreckage, civilians, soldiers, children. Every face turned toward her, their eyes reflecting something fragile. Hope. For a moment, she understood Elias's silence, what it meant to carry that kind of hope when you don't know if you'll survive the next hour. When they reached the outskirts, the shield field shimmered ahead. Beyond it, the storm was alive with enemy drones. "Once we cross," Elias said, loading his rifle, "we'll have 5 minutes before they triangulate our position." 5 minutes, Elira repeated. "Then let's make them count." They slipped through the breach and ran. The rain hit like bullets, the wind screaming with static energy. Elira could barely see, but she followed the flash of Elias's movement ahead, fast, focused, fearless. Enemy drones descended, red eyes slicing through the storm. Plasma fire lit the ruins. Elias dropped to one knee, firing in short bursts. His aim was perfect. Each drone fell like a dying spark. "Keep moving," he shouted. Elira pressed forward, her armor deflecting a glancing hit. For the first time, she felt the chaos humans called war. Raw, dirty, terrifying. But she also felt something else. Elias's presence ahead of her. Solid, steady. They reached the relay tower base just as lightning struck the upper spire. The explosion threw heat across the field. Elias checked his wrist display. Manual overrides in the control pit below. I'll handle it. You cover me! No, she said firmly. We both go. He met her gaze, rain streaming down his face. You're the last royal of your line. If you die, she stepped closer, her voice fierce. Then I'll die doing something worth it. For a second, they just stared at each other, two lives from opposite worlds, bound by one desperate moment. Then they moved. The control pit was a wreck, sparking wires, cracked panels, pools of rainwater. Elias knelt beside the main console, connecting cables with trembling hands. Almost there, he muttered. Just keep them off me. Illyra turned and fired from behind cover. Drones swarmed the entrance, their energy bolts lighting up the chamber. Her arms shook, but she didn't stop. Every shot she fired was fueled by something new, not duty but determination. One drone broke through the smoke, aiming for Elias's back. Elias! She screamed. He turned too late. The plasma bolt hit the wall beside him. She lunged, pushing him aside, the explosion catching her shoulder. He caught her before she fell. You're hit. I'm fine, she gasped, even as pain burned through her arm. Finish it. He slammed the final command key, and the relay tower came alive. Energy surged up the spire into the clouds, through the orbital cannon high above the capital, and then a blinding beam of blue light split the sky. The Syndic flagship shuddered under the strike, its hull cracking like glass. Seconds later, it erupted in a burst of fire that painted the heavens gold. Illyra stared in awe. You did it. Elias looked up through the storm, breathing hard. No, he said quietly. We did! The storm began to break, and though her shoulder throbbed with pain, Illyra realized something she'd never dared before. The human she'd once called a killer had just saved her world. The beam faded from the clouds, leaving silence in its wake. Valora Prime's sky, once burning, was now streaked with smoke and sunlight. The Syndic flagship was gone, torn apart in orbit. The rest of the enemy fleet scattered like frightened birds. Princess Illyra Veln stood in the broken relay tower, clutching her injured arm. Her breath came fast, the scent of ozone thick in the air. Beside her, Elias Corrin leaned against a ruined console, blood dripping from a cut across his brow. His armor was cracked, one hand pressed against his ribs, yet his eyes still watched the sky, as if he couldn't believe what he'd just done. Illyra turned to him. It's over, she said softly. You saved us, he gave a weak laugh. You mean we saved us? I just pushed the buttons, she smiled faintly. Humans, always downplaying miracles. His smile faded as he slumped down beside the wreckage. You should get back to your people, Princess. They'll need their leader now. She knelt beside him. And what about you? He looked away. I wasn't exactly invited to the victory celebration. Outside, the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, illuminating the ruins. The city was scarred but alive. Soldiers cheered through the comms, reports flooding in. The flagship is destroyed. The Syndic fleet is retreating. And in every voice a single word echoed. Hope. Illyra closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. Hope had a sound. She hadn't realized that until now. When she opened them again, Elias was staring at the ground, silent. You should be proud, she said. You gave my people a future. He shook his head. You don't get it. I didn't do this for pride. Every time I fight, someone dies. Every time I save one world, another burns. I'm not a hero, Illyra. She studied him for a long moment. You think being a hero means being flawless? You're wrong. He looked up at her then, really looked, and saw not a ruler, but a woman who'd just lost half her city and still found the strength to stand. You came here knowing we might kill you, she said quietly. You warned us, fought beside us, bled for us. That's what heroes do, Elias. They carry the burden no one else can. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. For so long he had been called murderer, traitor, outcast. Yet here, on a world he didn't belong to, an alien princess looked at him as if he were something more. Hours later, they were airlifted back to the capital. The palace was still scarred, but banners of blue light now shimmered from its towers. Citizens gathered in the courtyards, cheering as Illyra appeared on the balcony. She raised her hand, her voice carrying through the amplified speakers. My people, today we stood on the edge of extinction, and we survived. Not because of power or rank or blood, but because of courage. Her gaze shifted toward Elias, who stood just behind her, uncertain, out of place. This man, she continued, a human from beyond our stars, risked everything to save us. When we saw an enemy, he saw lives worth saving. Remember his name, Elias Corrin, because without him there would be no Velora Prime. The crowd fell silent for a breath, and then erupted in cheers. Elias froze. He wasn't used to being cheered. When he turned to Elira, she smiled softly. Now they'll see you as I do. He swallowed hard. And how's that? As a hero, she said simply. That night, when the stars returned to the sky, Elira found Elias sitting on the edge of the palace balcony, looking out over the sleeping city. You could leave now, she said quietly. Go back to your people. He didn't turn around. And do what? Tell them I saved an alien world they don't even believe in. She stepped closer, her voice softer now. Then stay. Help rebuild. You've already changed everything. Elias finally looked at her, tired, scarred, but alive. Maybe I will, he said, and for the first time there was peace in his voice. A month had passed since the skies burned. Velora Prime was rebuilding, brick by brick, light by light. The sound of hammers replaced the sound of war. Children laughed again in the streets. Yet beneath the calm, not everything had healed. Princess Elira Veln sat in her chamber reading reports. Every page spoke of loss, cities destroyed, families displaced, resources drained. And still, people whispered the same name through the recovery camps, the human Elias Corrin. To many, he was the mysterious savior from the stars. To others, a ghost of war who should have never been trusted. And to her, he had become something she could no longer ignore. A knock sounded at her door. Enter, she said. Elias stepped in, cleaner now, wearing a dark uniform of borrowed Veloran fabric. He looked less like a fugitive and more like a soldier, though the wildness in his eyes remained. You asked for me, he said. She nodded. The Reconstruction Council meets today. They want to offer you citizenship. He blinked. Me, a citizen? They say it's the least they can do. He gave a dry laugh. I thought they'd rather throw me back into orbit. Elira smiled faintly. They would have before they saw who you really were. His gaze softened. And who's that, princess? She met his eyes. Someone who proves everything I was taught about humans was wrong. They walked together through the palace garden, a quiet refuge that had somehow survived the war. The sun glowed warm on the silver leaves. Elira paused beside the fountain. When I was a child, I used to think humans were monsters, she said softly. My tutors taught that you destroyed your own worlds with greed and chaos, that you were too dangerous to join the stars. Elias knelt, touching the water's surface. They weren't wrong. She looked down at him. Then why are you different? He smiled sadly. Because I saw what that chaos did. I watched cities burn, saw good people die while leaders argued over pride. I promised myself I wouldn't let it happen again, no matter what planet I stood on. Elira felt something stir in her chest. It wasn't admiration anymore. It was connection, the kind forged in shared loss. Later that evening, the Reconstruction Council gathered, alien officials in ceremonial robes, their faces solemn. When Elira entered with Elias beside her, whispers filled the hall. This is highly irregular, one counselor hissed. A human granted Veloran honor? Impossible. Another murmured, he's dangerous. He could be a spy. Elias stood silent as the accusations flew. He didn't defend himself. He didn't have to. Elira did it for him. She stepped forward, her voice firm. He's dangerous, yes, to our enemies. He could be a spy, perhaps, but one who risked his life for a world that wasn't his. You owe him your lives, and you speak of fear. The hall fell silent. Elias looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. Then the counselor at the center rose slowly. Then let it be written. Elias Corrin, protector of Velora Prime, ally of the royal line. Elira's heart lifted. For the first time since the war, she smiled without hiding it. That night, a soft wind drifted through the repaired palace windows. Elias stood on the balcony again, watching the stars. Elira joined him, her steps quiet. Still can't sleep? She asked gently. He chuckled. After everything? I'm afraid if I close my eyes, it'll all start again. She moved closer, her voice barely above a whisper. It won't, not while you're here. He turned to her, their faces inches apart in the silver light. For a moment, neither spoke. The war, the pain, the distance between their worlds, it all faded into silence. Maybe peace isn't something you find, he said finally. Maybe it's something you protect. Her gaze softened. Then stay and protect it with me. And in that quiet, between the fading echoes of war and the birth of something new, both understood what their hearts had already chosen. The stars over Valora Prime glowed bright again. It had been 6 months since the Syndic invasion. The wounds of war were fading into memory. Streets were rebuilt, the palace restored, and hope, once a fragile ember, now burned steady across the planet. But peace never comes without ghosts. Princess Elira. Velen stood before the memorial wall, a great slab of white crystal etched with the names of the fallen. Her reflection shimmered among them, faint and solemn. She touched one name with trembling fingers, her father's. He believed peace came from strength, she whispered, but maybe it comes from kindness instead. Behind her, footsteps approached. Elias Corrin stood quietly, dressed not in armor this time, but in a simple Valoran uniform. No rank, no title. Just a man. His eyes carried the same storm-gray calm she had come to know. You still talk to him? He asked gently. Every morning, she said. He was a good man, but he couldn't see beyond fear. Elias nodded. Most of us can't. Fear's easy. Trust is harder. Elira turned to face him. And yet you trusted me. After everything my people said about yours, he smiled faintly. Guess I had to prove them wrong. They walked together through the garden paths, past rebuilt fountains and blooming silver trees. The air smelled of rain and life. Do you ever think about leaving? She asked quietly. Sometimes, he admitted. Part of me misses the stars. The sound of a ship's engine. The silence of space and the other part. He looked at her, eyes warm with something unspoken. The other part found something worth staying for. Elira's heart skipped. She wanted to speak, but her throat tightened. There were no royal words for this kind of feeling. No ceremony for what bloomed quietly between two souls who'd faced death together. Instead, she simply said, Valora is safer because of you. Because of a human, Elias chuckled softly. You say that like it's a miracle. It is, she said. My people were taught humans were chaos, but you showed us courage, empathy, sacrifice. You didn't just save our world. You changed it. He turned away slightly, his voice low. Maybe one day that'll be enough. That evening they gathered on the palace balcony for the Festival of Renewal, a ceremony held for the first time since the war's end. Thousands of lanterns floated into the twilight glowing like golden stars. Elira addressed the people, her voice carried through every speaker and screen. 6 months ago, we stood at the edge of ruin, but we were saved not by our weapons but by unity. A stranger from another world stood beside us when no one else would. He fought, bled, and nearly died so that we might live. She turned toward Elias. To some he was a killer, to others a hero. To me as he is both, because heroes are born from what they endure, not from what they destroy. The crowd grew silent. Then applause erupted, wave after wave of it echoing through the capital. Elias looked stunned, almost embarrassed. You didn't have to say all that, she smiled. I wanted to, he exhaled, looking up at the drifting lanterns. Funny thing, he murmured. Back home they called me a monster too. Now I'm a hero on a world that isn't even mine. Elira's voice softened. Maybe this world is yours now. He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, she saw no pain in his eyes, only peace. Later, when the last lantern vanished into the stars, Elira and Elias stood side by side at the edge of the balcony. Do you think humans and Valerans will ever truly trust each other? She asked. Elias thought for a long moment, then smiled. They will, because we already did. She reached out, her hand brushing his. Then maybe that's how every story like ours should begin. He turned toward her, his voice gentle but sure. Not with war, she smiled, but with understanding. And as the stars shimmered above them, two souls from different worlds stood together, not as alien and human, not as princess and soldier, but simply as equals. For once the galaxy felt like it could finally heal. And far beyond Valora Prime, In the quiet between worlds, the legend of the human who proved them all wrong began to spread.